Over the last decade, Pods has revolutionized the moving and storage industry with a unique new concept. Pods delivers one of its containers to you. You fill it, then Pods picks it up and either puts it into storage or moves it anywhere in the country for you. Podzilla, the company's innovative hydraulic lift, places your container on level ground so you can easily load your things. You can pack at your own pace and keep the Pods container for as long as you need it.
Began by a group of firemen, and the idea was born out of the fact of when a home would go through some sort of a partial loss, they needed a temporary place to store people's personal belongings, and typically it was stored in front of their house and it was covered with a tarp and not very safe and secure.
So he and another firefighter actually erected the first Pods container in the driveway of one of the firefighters, and the concept took off. As
more and more people found out about the idea, the capital needs in the business demanded a change in direction.
As we evolved, we moved into the broader moving and storage markets. However, since we had the innovator advantage, we are the largest in our sector, and all of our competitors combined don't have as many containers as we do.
Today, the Clearwater, Florida-based Pods Enterprises Incorporated has grown substantially, serving more than 240 million consumers through its franchise network in the U.S., Canada, Australia, and the U.K. The Pods network has completed more than 250,000 long-distance relocations, exceeded 1 million deliveries, and has over 140,000 Pods containers in service.
We will achieve our 2 millionth move roughly sometime in the middle of 2012.
I think what makes Pods different is our flexibility. It gives you the ability to do the move any way you want. You can get the container delivered, you don't even have to be there when it's being delivered.
People are able to load it at ground level. If it's raining on a particular day, you can load the next day. The opportunity for someone to access their goods without having to drive it to a destination, unload it into a mini storage location when they actually find their final premises, apartment, house, whatever, is all avoided.
So what drives a person to create a business knowing that financial success isn't guaranteed? How do you determine if you'll be small and independent or large enough to successfully implement franchises into your business model? And how do you go about getting started? These are some of the types of questions people ask themselves when launching a new business. In general, there are 3 forms of business ownership: a sole proprietorship, which is owned and managed by one person; a partnership, where 2 or more people form a company and are legally considered co-owners; and finally, a corporation, where although it is formed by 1 or more people, it has the legal right to act and have liability that is separate from its owners. No matter what the current form of ownership is, there's no reason a company cannot change it down the road.
The genesis of the company began as an individual sole proprietorship. Eventually, venture money came in and a corporation was formed. That corporation was evolved as the business model proved itself out. Eventually, it evolved to an expanded corporation, including this franchise model, where we actually provide a franchise disclosure document. We actually had franchise territory sales and developed the business model on that basis.
There are advantages and disadvantages to each form of business ownership, and it's important that the prospective business owner weigh the pros and cons of each. One advantage of being a sole proprietor is that it can be easy to start your new company. You are your own boss, and you set your own hours.
So the individual proprietorship, or maybe some joint ownership in that individual proprietorship model, was proving out the business model. The next stage after the business model started to prove out, where they demonstrated that we had consistent rentals and demand of the product and so on, identified the opportunity for venture money to get in and to expand that model further. Eventually, the opportunity to do it simultaneously and to have multiple resources deploying into the respective markets really is what led to the benefits of the franchise model.
You may, however, determine that a partnership is better suited for your company. An advantage of being in a partnership is that it can let you focus on what you do well. For instance, maybe your expertise is in the marketing of a business, but the operational side of running a company might not be your strong suit. Appropriate types of skills and expertise that you are lacking can be a huge asset to your business. Don't confuse ownership partnerships with strategic partnerships. Corporation is the third type of business. A traditional C corporation is its own legal entity, with its owners being its stockholders. It has the authority to act, as well as have liability that is separate from its owners. So, stockholders are not responsible for any debts that the company incurs. There are other types of corporations too, such as an S Corp, which is a small business with no more than 100 shareholders, or a limited liability company, or LLC, where there are no stockholders but there is limited liability for the owners. Depending on your situation, there are specific tax advantages for each type of ownership. Consult with either an accountant or an attorney, or in some cases both, to see what's best for you.
The key challenge, in a startup business like ours is that while the container itself, which, back in the day cost anywhere from $2,200 to $2,500 a piece, the ability to go out and seek bank financing, where they typically want to attach some sort of a collateralization to the debt, the banks were a bit reluctant to provide funding in the form of debt financing, because while it did cost us that much money, the secondary market, if they ever had to repossess that collateral and sell it to someone else, there wasn't any demand for it. So it began initially with a lot of venture money up front. Eventually, as the business model started to prove itself out and the ability to identify what the business potential was, is when banks and other private lending institutions came into the business model and started to expand it broader and broader.
When a smaller business reaches a certain level of success, it can become attractive to another company looking to expand through a merger or acquisition. Simply put, a merger is when two companies join together to form one. Acquisitions occur when one company purchases the other company's properties and accepts its obligations.
I think that there are different life cycles in a company, and Pods was started by an entrepreneur, and he did an unbelievable job of growing the company to where it was in 10 years. But at that point, it really needed to be taken over by professional management who could bring the company to the next level.
There are two other special forms of business ownership: franchises and cooperatives. A franchise is when a company, known as a franchisor, sells the rights to use its business name to offer a product or service in a specific territory to someone else, the franchisee. This is a popular option for those looking to own a business but want the security of a company with a proven track record.
Currently, we have 132 Pods franchise markets in the system, and generally a market is a city. 120 of those are in the U.S., 8 are in Canada, and 4 are in Australia.
A franchise-based company can provide franchisees with several benefits, including management training and expertise, marketing, financial advice, and in some cases, financial assistance. Traditionally, franchise-based companies have a lower failure rate than other startup organizations.
Ultimately, the idea of utilizing the franchise model was born out of, not only necessity in terms of the capital financing and so on, but it also had to do with how do you utilize that good entrepreneurial spirit into a local marketplace.
Franchisees bring another advantage, though, and that is their knowledge and their connections in the local market. So they can take advantage of particularities in a market, and it would be difficult for us as a corporation to come in. I think, on the other hand, in other big markets like Chicago or LA, the founders of Pods had the foresight to keep those for themselves. So in the very biggest markets that are pretty standard business markets that are just going to adapt well with our standard business model, we reserve those for corporate operations.
There are some hurdles to overcome for potential franchisees, such as startup costs for the rights to the franchise, shared profits or royalties, specific management regulations that are required of all franchisees, and certain restrictions on what you can sell and where you can sell it.
Franchise that makes this commitment is paying an initial franchise fee upwards of $200,000 to $250,000 for just exclusivity on the territory. In addition, they're also making an investment in containers, and at $2,500 to $3,000 per container, that's a pretty significant investment.
I think that the larger investment also brings with it a larger return.
Finally, there is a different type of organization called a cooperative, which is owned by the people who use it for their mutual benefit. A cooperative runs like a democracy, with members electing its own board of directors and often hiring professional management. Co-ops are a growing portion of the U.S. economy and serve markets such as housing, healthcare, childcare, food, and other services, such as credit unions. Got a great idea you think would make the foundation for a successful business? Now you have some background on several different forms of business ownership. All successful businesses like Pods got their start somewhere. Where will yours?